Are we calling it podcast or
I don't know, because it's
vodcast? I saw somewhere. Is that a bit wanky, vodcast?
a little bit.
Looking good? Feeling good?
Yeah, how are you guys?
Pumped. First time I've ever said pumped.
It doesn't suit you. Right, let's get podcasting. Welcome to the cutting room, and in this week's episode we're going to be talking about how to deliver an amazing customer experience. So lads, the day's finally here. It's been a long time coming, but our first podcast, how are we all feeling?
Excited. Good. Like, we've talked about it for a while. Finally to get into this room and hopefully impart a bit of wisdom.
Yeah, you just took all the words I wanted to use. So, yeah.
Think of some more? Or?
Well, no, it's a good opportunity to kind of put all the cards out on the table, no pun intended. But yeah, and chat about some cool stuff.
Share that wisdom. Yeah, no, definitely. Right, so let's get into it. So I guess to kick us off in terms of what, I guess the purpose of what we're looking to do is kind of share our experiences, both as consumers ourselves, but both as, we've run 7 videos for about 9 years now. So what we've learnt about delivering our clients a good experience and what we've learnt from being clients to our suppliers, I guess. It's kind of pulling all that together and sort of coming up with what we think some good advice. So I think to kick us off, I think, what would you say the first thing, Jake, to you that springs to mind when you're thinking an amazing customer journey?
I think the first place you need to start is, really caring about, your customers and the people that you're working with. I think showing that care and imparting that into all stages of the customer journey, that's really going to make a big difference in maybe it's a first impression that you're creating with a customer, or you're wanting to kind of build on what you've already had with them. It's a really important starting point to make sure that you're putting as much care and attention into your customers as you can.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something I come up quite a lot against in my role. It's quite a simple thing to do. It's using things like people's first names, or it's remembering or using your CRM system to jot down events or things that people may have mentioned if they were going on holiday. It's showing that you've listened to people and showing that you care. And I think when you're in sort of meetings with people, I've been in meetings before with suppliers and they're looking at the watch and checking the time, and you're like, well, it just makes me feel not very special and like they don't want to be there. And it's really simple to do it.
Yeah, like you said, everyone does just kind of want to feel loved, don't you? You want to feel like you matter. And I think like what you mentioned around using people's names and kind of remembering information they've said is a good way of making people feel like that. But you've got to be careful because you can come across quite creepy. And I've had calls where somebody have started referencing my dog and loads of things that I liked. I'd never spoken to them before. I was like, this is weird.
How do you know this?
I was like, how do you know this? I don't even know your name. Yeah. And you're spouting off my dog's name and my wife.
Love what you've done with the front room.
But like it's good that they did a bit of research before, but there is
you can do that in time. I think once you've built that rapport, it's then good to show that you care and remember them, but don't just dump it on somebody straight away because it's a little bit scary.
I think as well, it's actually having a genuine care. If you don't care but you're trying to pretend that you care, why are you actually doing what you're doing? I think it's important to really sort of empathise with your customers and actually be bothered, because it'll make it a lot easier for you going forward.
I think that's a good point, because it is really easy to tell when people are kind of faking it or trying to feign interest. So I think if you can kind of find like a common interest or something like that you can kind of get on board with, then it makes it feel a lot more personable rather than just being like trying to pretend you care about something.
Well, you can't fake it, and I think if you don't care, find someone that does and get them to deliver that. I guess moving on from that showing the love and showing that you care, I think another sort of point to add to that is around keeping your word. Showing that you care, but to back that up, I guess you need to be able to do what you say you're going to do to people as well.
There's nothing more frustrating, and we've had this when we've worked with suppliers, where the initial engagement, they tell you all these great things that they do, but then actually when you get into it, they tell you that you're going to get something by Friday, don't hear from them, then you're chasing it the following week. And straight away, as a customer, you're put into that situation where like, I shouldn't be chasing this. Do you know what I mean? Like you're having a negative experience already, whereas it's really simple, but not a lot of people do it really well. But it is simple. Just let people know.
And at the point of when someone's chased it as well, that's kind of the peak of the negative experience, is they're getting in touch with you because they've had this worry or what's going on for a few days prior to it. And it's just so simple. If you can't do it on the day you say you're going to do it, let them know on that day and let them know when they can expect to receive it. Yeah. And so many people don't do it.
Yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand with, what we said about showing that care and attention. If you're then going to go off and, leave people in the dark, not do things when you said you're going to do them, it kind of just shows the exact opposite, and it just makes everything that you've already done just look like it was a bit of for sure to get them in through the door, but now actually you don't really care, and it's not exactly a difficult thing to do to just update people, what the stage of the process is. And it's quite rare that if there has been an issue, if you're upfront and honest and say, oh look, this has happened, but this is now the implications, and we're going to do this for you, it's very rare that someone will still be, kind of negative about that. I think it's quite difficult to, when someone is sort of being open and honest and nice about it, to be annoyed. But if you, like you say, if they've got to the point where they are chasing things up, they've already had to have had that negative experience and those negative feelings about you, that's when they're starting to do more of the work, which is exactly what you don't want to do. You want to take work off people's desk and not make extra work for them.
I think the key is also is not to be too reliant on memory. To not be reliant on memory at all. I think you need to have processes in place because everyone's different. In particularly in our industry. I mean, I don't really have a creative bone in my body, but I know most of the people I work with do. And creatives, are, generally speaking, may not be the most organised. And I think you need to put those processes in place that enables them to be able to do that, to focus on their strengths.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, like you say, everybody is different. Everybody kind of works and behaves in different ways. And as business owners or managers, what you want to be doing is building the right processes for the right people. And then if they are not the right people for that particular part of the process, it's finding somebody whose skill set does match that. So it might be using somebody a bit more organised, and that's more in their DNA than the creatives say, but have them working together so that kind of customer experience doesn't really drop down. And I think in terms of, like you say, just getting things to people when you say, well, it's the easiest thing to do, when actually out of all the things that could go wrong, say in a project for any industry, just not letting somebody know something is the simplest thing to do. There's so many things that can go wrong, but
it takes seconds.
Just not sending somebody an email when it's not coming at that point. Yeah. You're not going to get it. It's like such a simple thing, but so many people don't get it right.
You do need to put yourself in your customers' shoes and understanding what's important to them, and I think that kind of naturally takes us on to the next point, is just around understanding what that customer journey is for your clients, and also really understanding what those different touch points are and how they can be improved. And it's only by truly understanding, I guess, what they want, then you can start to put a process in place to deliver that.
Yeah, I think we can all be guilty of it, and we've been guilty of it in the past at Seven, certainly a fair few years ago. Yeah, very much focused on what works for you, what works for our team, and fall ill of kind of not really understanding how it benefits the customer and what their experience is. We've had it in the past where all your processes are kind of set up for what makes our job easier, what makes our guys' jobs easier, not what's best for the customer. And
we had a bit of a sort of change internally, didn't we, where we did a lot around process probably a few years back, and people were coming up with some really good ideas, but like you said, that made our life easier. But we had to do a bit of a shift from a mentality point of view. So it doesn't matter what's important, what makes our lives easier, although we do want to be more efficient as a business, but it's only going to really work if it makes life easier for your client time and time again. And I think we've got there, but I think it took a little while for people to think, oh, well, actually, it's not about us, it's about them and what makes their lives easier.
I think as well, like it can be really easy to fool yourself into thinking that you've got your processes nailed because everything in your office is running great. everything that you need to do is dead easy, and you're getting the product or the service out on time, why wouldn't you think that your process is nailed? But it's only by kind of taking that step back, putting yourself in the customer's shoes and really sort of focusing in on what are those touch points and how is that affecting the client, and how can you make little improvements here and there. It's not all about kind of making big wholesale changes that's going to make a huge difference. It's about those little tiny little 1% here and there that are going to really make a difference, I think.
And I guess what you say there kind of also takes us on to the next point, is once you've got that customer experience, customer journey, whatever you want to call it, once you've got that nailed down, it's making sure that you're then consistently doing it, because there's no point delivering a top-notch experience a few times and then that level drops, because that's where you're going to experience problems.
Yeah, and that's almost worse than if you have a mediocre service that's consistent compared to wowing somebody once and next minute it's okay, next minute it's wow. Do you know what I mean? As a customer, people use McDonald's as an example. Like, it's not the best food, but no matter wherever you go, it's consistent.
You know what you're going to get, basically, don't you?
Yeah, whether you like it or not, but at least you know what your expectations are. And I think that's, as customers and as people, that's what you want to know. What's the most frustrating thing is like, oh yeah, this was brilliant. Tell people, and then they do it, and then I know it was rubbish. And it's like
if you go to a restaurant and it's good, it's up there, great food, great experience. You go next time, great food, great experience. You go third time, not quite as good. That bit wasn't quite right. That's it's not quite to that level, and that's the one that sticks out, and that's the one that you remember. Whereas if they were already at that level and they maintained it, you know what you're going to expect. But yeah, as soon as those service levels alter, or it's not consistent, that's when people start to see it as a bad experience, even though it might well be better than something else. If it's not consistent, it feels bad.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of your main goals of having an amazing customer experience and putting all this effort in is that people do come back to you time and time again. Now, what's the point if they're kind of enjoyed the first experience, come back, and it's not to that level? It not only kind of reduces dramatically the confidence they have in you, but also it just makes you seem slightly disorganized, disingenuous. It's really kind of about making sure that what you're doing in that initial stage of building that first impression is something that is sustainable and repeatable, so that when people do come back to you because they had a great experience, that they're going to experience that again, and in turn that also builds up a really good level of confidence in you, because they know now that every time they're going to come back, they're going to get the same level of experience.
I think that's a really good point as well, particularly when you're looking at your customer journeys, to not be too ambitious to start with. Just like you say, you could map it out, add all these brilliant things, and you're like, yeah, if you have that experience, that's amazing. But like you say, it's got to be sustainable and repeatable. So I think if you are looking at that, start off small first. Do you know what I mean? Don't go too big too soon, where you're kind of destined to fail, I suppose, aren't you? Look at what you can do easily and repeatable to start with, and then you can kind of build on that, can't you?
I think in any market as well, whereby someone's found a supplier or a business that is providing them something and they're happy with everything the first time and it's consistent every time, it's very rare that they'll go looking for something else.
I guess the key to being consistent, though, is you may have that perfect experience mapped out, you've worked out in the boardroom, wherever, but it's if everybody in your organisation isn't bought into what that experience is, then that is where you're going to get the inconsistencies, because you need the people who are going to be more client-facing, the people that are delivering that experience. They need to be bought into it. They need to care. They need to be able to keep their word. They need to be able to do all of that, because that's where you're ultimately going to fall down if not everybody's engaged with it.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally that's where most businesses fail, is that you don't have that buy-in from the rest of the team. And like you mentioned, particularly roles and people who aren't usually customer facing, so it could be the more creative roles, like in our industry, people who are making the videos and doing that type of work, they're less used to it than, say, in sales and marketing. So it's, again, when we touched on about processes and trying to get people to think about what it means to the customer, that's why it's so important to be able to get buy-in from the team, because at the end of the day, they're going to meet so many different people from the business, and if just one person isn't bought into it and is focused on them and their work as opposed to the client, then ultimately that experience is going to fall down.
And I think that took us a while to get to as a business, because my background was always sales, client experience, all that side of things. So it's always been kind of natural to me, I guess, whereas the majority of people in our business are production creatives, and their passion is around the creating of the content as opposed to the client experience. And so it's taken a little while for us to, I guess, get people excited about that side of things. And I think we have got there now, but I think it does take a little while because it doesn't always come naturally to everyone. But as a business, you need to put those processes and things in place to make it easy for people as well.
Yeah, I think it is particularly relevant to a business like ours, because there has to be various different departments involved in order to produce what we do. So obviously that's going to mean clients being passed from different people. It's just how it works. But if everyone's kind of singing from the same hymn sheet and providing the same level of expectation, it's going to be a lot more seamless for the client, I think. And I think it starts with the team values that you have in place. It can't just be, right, this is our process, you all need to care about this at this point and that at that point. It's about kind of your whole kind of company's culture and values that you live and breathe by, and I think that's something that we're particularly good at.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, that's the only way to get kind of real buy-in. And I think one of the things I've kind of learned over the years is just, particularly with customer experience, that actually that by far and above often trumps the actual product or service that you're delivering. Like, you could make the best videos in the world, but if nobody likes working with you, then you won't get any work.
Do it again. Yeah.
No, and that's, I think for me now, is the thing that kind of does get you a bit excited of how you can kind of improve that.
I'm hearing that another sort of big thing is to be asking your clients how the experience was for them. You're putting yourself in their shoes, that's great, but that's still you thinking what they want. You only know what they want and what their experience has been like if you ask them. Again, sounds really simple. It took us a little while now we're in a position where we do feedback calls pretty much after every project now, but that took quite a while to get to that point. And that's only really how you're going to know what that experience has been like.
And I would say that was game changing for us, because I think the beauty of it, what we've found is it's not the really bad feedback that you were missing. It's quite often, if people aren't happy, they tell you. But the things that we got out of it was kind of little small process things that would just make their life easier, which for us you just weren't aware of. And it's like just so valuable getting that insight from customers to then enable you to tweak those processes.
You have to do it en masse, though. I think what we were guilty of, maybe at one point, where we'd have one bit of feedback and like, oh god, they didn't like that, we best change that. And like, actually it turns out that 10 other people did like that. So you have to have the experience, what that experience looks like, but it does have to have flexibility within it where you can change it to certain clients. So that particular client likes to communicate in that way, or likes that particular style of working. Well, that's what they get. It's having an end-to-end experience, but having those different nuances that are going to create that wow factor to the individuals.
Yeah,
I think it's all about the attitude that you have towards your feedback as well. I think if someone has, had a slightly negative experience at some point in the process, being asked about it and again showing that you do care about what's happened and you're wanting to learn how to rectify that next time, it just gives out a lot more of a positive message than if you were sort of first of all, they've had to go to you to complain about something. If you've actually asked about how the process was and it's given the opportunity for someone to say, oh, well, this could have been slightly better, or that wasn't right how I expected, it just kind of puts you back in that kind of positive light in their eyes, I think.
Yeah, it is showing that you care, isn't it? Like we mentioned at the start, you could just leave it at that. Like, you've done the work, done it, everyone seemed happy, but actually putting yourself out there and getting that feedback is vital, isn't it?
It takes something bad for somebody to complain. So there'll be a lot of other negative impressions people are having that haven't complained. And we were kind of guilty of that a few years back. We were like, that project's not gone particularly well. I might, they haven't heard anything. We'll just leave that. Whereas now we're like, well, we'll contact any person sort of religiously after a project to see how it's gone. And I think that's where you do really understand all these different things that you just wouldn't have done before.
That's where you get the good stuff. Right? It's very easy ringing the ones where you know that they've loved it. It's like, yeah, great, we've got brilliant feedback. And actually, I think that's the best thing about the feedback. It's not always, obviously, it's great to get fantastic feedback, but it's kind of the little things that you weren't aware of. They're the things that you can kind of make real change from. And
it's understanding negative feedback presents an opportunity. It's frustrating, and you think, I wish that hadn't happened. However, like you mentioned, it presents you an opportunity to actually rectify the situation, look like you care, because there'll have been instances where those clients have not had a good experience with other people, and they've just thought, well, you know what, stuff it, that's kind of how it was, sorry it hasn't worked out. Whereas if you chuck everything into it and say, look, sorry, that shouldn't have happened, be honest with them, and then show them how you're going to rectify it, they're going to come back to you.
Yeah, it can really help with that, getting that repeat business as well, because if you've had that sort of open and honest conversation about how a certain project has gone, the customer then knows that you're on the same wavelength as them for any potential future projects, because you've had that experience and you probably both learned things from it as well.
Yeah, and we found that as well, actually. You get feedback, they give us feedback. We can give them, when you've built a good enough relationship, you can come feedback and go both ways.
It does go both ways, yeah.
And I think the important thing is just making sure that when you get that feedback is what you then do with it, both internally, but then also making sure you're sharing that back with the customer. So it's all well and good having a feedback call and telling them everything that you think, but then if you don't come back with anything after, it kind of feels like it's disappeared.
We've had it when we've heard sort of staff say, "Oh, so and so has done this again," and it slows the process down or whatever it is. And then I'm like, "Well, have we told them that?" And it's like, "Oh, well, no." And it's like we kind of you're getting frustrated by it, but you're not letting the client know that. I mean, the client probably wants to know that something they're doing is slowing things down, or meaning they're not going to get as good of a product or as good of a video or whatever. So if we can have that, like you say, it has to go both ways, feedback, because that's how you build a better partnership and how you ultimately you collaborate and work together in a better way.
When there is issues with customer experience, it's not because people are knobheads and don't care. Quite often it's just not aware or not aware of how it feels on the other side. I was just going to say, I think the other thing that we've kind of taken from the feedback is then being able to kind of create a metric and a KPI around it. So you've got something, a really clear idea of where you're at from that perspective.
You love a KPI.
I do love a KPI. So we use the NPS score. We're at 81 at the moment, if you're interested. Which is
well in February. So it's probably 90.
Probably 90. Yeah, it'll be 90 by then, which is world class for people who know.
But I think that kind of takes us to the final point. I guess we're wanting to make is around sort of. Is reviewing that process regularly. It is an ongoing thing. It's not like, we've got the perfect customer experience. There it is. That's it forever. Because, people change, technologies change, what people want changes, what your competitors does, how they're operating changes. So you have to keep your finger to the pulse on this as well and review it regularly.
I think as well, you're always taking on new clients and entering new markets, and you could quite easily sleepwalk yourself into a situation where you're working with a new type of business or client and they like things doing a certain different way, or there's certain things that just haven't come to light within your existing projects that you could end up missing. So I think that regular review of the process and looking at where those kind of pain points are arising, it's a really effective way of making sure that you're constantly giving the best experience that you can.
So I think that brings us to a natural conclusion right there, and just by pure chance and coincidence, we've managed to come up with 7 top tips in delivering an amazing customer experience.
Yeah, almost like we planned it.
Yeah, you could say that. So I guess just before we sign off, I think we just want to sort of reiterate what those 7 sort of key takeaways are for the viewers. So number 1, just show that you care. Number 2, do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. Number 3, map out what that customer journey looks like and put yourself in your client's shoes. Number 4, be consistent. Number 5, make sure that your whole team's engaged with the process. Number 6, learn from your clients, ask their feedback. And then finally, number 7, review it regularly. It's an ongoing process. So thanks for joining me in the cutting room today, chaps. Hope you've enjoyed yourselves.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Paul. It's been a
really
blast.
interesting.
You are very welcome. And stay tuned for episode 2, which is going to be dropping in a few weeks, and we're going to be covering how to create cost-effective videos that resonate with your target audience.